Hello and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I'm Brian Calley, the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Marketing and Strategic Communications at SBAM. Welcome to today's show. As always, we'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Marana Group. Marana Group is a data, document, and distribution company in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and you should definitely check out their Facebook page and consider them for an upcoming project. So Brian, it's National Small Business Week, and we are going to kick it off with Michigan Celebrates Small Business. Actually, there's some festivities tonight, and then the main event, the gala, is tomorrow night. And we have quite a few members who will be recognized.
So one of my favorite events every year is when we recognize the small business awardees of the Small Business Development Center, the USSBA, and Michigan Celebrate Small Business. The biggest one is at 50 companies to watch. And so we'll share, we pulled out of all these different award categories. Here are the SBAM members that are being recognized. As you can see, there's a bunch of them. Of course, we have a lot of members. Almost everybody's a member of SBM, and if you're not, then you should be. It's really an awesome organization to connect and plug in with other organizations. But we just wanted to say congratulations to the SBM members that will be recognized tomorrow night at the gala. It's held at the Breslin Center in East Lansing, so where the Michigan State Spartans play basketball, but that can be turned into a gala space. It's a really cool venue to have an event, and so I mean, just so many of them on here, and actually might be familiar to people because just as an example, High Caliber Karting and Entertainment, Jordan Munster's been a guest I think a couple of times on this briefing. Bridge Street Exchange, another one. Kevin Bagola, who's been a guest on this briefing as well. Right on the top there, one bold step. Jen Jurgens as a leadership council member at SBAM, and then I wanted to point out a few others that are particularly close. Inverb Marketing Incorporated, at the top of that right-hand column. Lisa Smith, we co-produced a Sunday morning TV program with her for years here in Lansing. Does just a great growing business. KTM Industries, another one. Tim Colonies, who has been a former board member of ours and very close with our organization. Actually, this whole space, see that Matheson and Matheson Architects, SBAM space was designed by that firm, and Tom Matheson, a former not just on the board but board chair of SBAM, and I wanted to give a shout out also to Space Inc. Kathy Hughes-Holboom, who is a former board member of ours as well. So really awesome group of small businesses. And it's something that when to these 50 companies to watch, plus the other awardees of the SBDC and SBA, there's a very extensive process where these businesses are nominated and then apply for recognition, and the economic impact is something that's always looked at. And we had gone back a few years ago and looked at, as long as we've been doing these awards and recognitions, what has been the impact both in terms of sales and employment. And if you look at these 50 companies every single year going back, I think it's maybe 16 or 17 or 18 years, somewhere like that this has been going on. The impact gets into the tens of thousands of employees, and that's, remember all the fuss about Amazon having a second headquarters they're going to put somewhere else, and all this competition. Well, our 50 companies to watch and the alumni of that going back has really had an Amazon HQ2 impact, except for in every single corner of our state and in every industry that you can think of. Provides a real resiliency to the economy. So congratulations to all the award winners, but especially to the SBAM members who have really put themselves out there, making a big difference and being rightfully recognized for their contributions to the Michigan economy and the communities that they operate in.
It's a really exciting event, and we look forward to celebrating tomorrow night. I did pull out an economic impact stat that we received, and just last year, the previous class of 50 companies to watch winners, they generated over $350 million in total revenue, and they reported over 1,400 full-time equivalent of employees in 2021. So, and they're still projecting new jobs into this year. So,
just one year's worth, and it really it's something that there's a lot of lip service to the impact that small business are the backbone of the economy, which politicians always say. But the thing is, it's actually true. And so when we look at just these 50, imagine just these 50 companies, there are hundreds of thousands of small businesses in our state. If you include sole proprietors that maybe aren't, in some cases, not doing it as a full-time job, it gets all the way almost to 1 million. And so there are so many different small businesses in our state, from those that people are kind of doing it on the side all the way through to major employers in their community. And just 50 of them that we recognized last year have that type of impact with 1,400 employees. So it's just a great opportunity to recognize, and this, of course, being National Small Business Week, is a great week to do it.
And so we should celebrate National Small Business Week and go out, support your local businesses. Maybe try to find a business you've never patronized before and really spread the love a little bit this week. And of course, we think every week is Small Business Week, but your support does make a difference.
Yeah, it does make and there's a lot of different ways that you can support, and it, naturally, going out of your way to try to create a little additional opportunity, doing business with each other, treating others the way that you want to be treated. Of course, most of our audience are small business owners to this briefing, and some of the best customers to small businesses are other small businesses. And so it's a good opportunity really to just kind of go through, reevaluate who, who's on your vendor list and who you do business with, and see how close you can create some relationships to keep the benefit of the business that you do as local as possible, just like you would like others to do for you.
Excellent point. So that's a lot of love, good love fest for small business, but our members are still facing some challenges. And last week, we released our survey results, and workforce challenges were still at the top of the list. There's a lot of reasons that workers may not yet be returning to the workforce. We've talked before about childcare issues, but we had a recent article from our friends at ASE, the American Society of Employers, that reported out in a study from the Federal Reserve's Monetary Policy Report that 4 times as many people are out of work taking care of adult family members than those who stopped working to care for children during the pandemic. And that was the first time I personally had seen that statistic.
Yeah, this is it just shows how complex these issues are for why people have exited the workforce. And when we did our survey, of course, we weren't surprised to see this high on the list. So we see rising costs, supply chain disruptions, and difficulty staying fully staffed or finding and retaining employees as being the top issues. And so we think of it in a certain way. It's the unemployment situation last year, or school not being in place, or childcare. And for some people, those are the issues. But there are a lot of cohorts of people that have different issues, and one that maybe hasn't received much attention are how many people that are out as caregivers. Now, there was so the survey work being done in this area is quite interesting and revealing. Of those who are caregivers for adults, so caregivers maybe for parents, most of the time I suspect it is parents, but caregivers for adults, the 20% of them had to leave their jobs in order to do the caregiving. Another 40% had to reduce hours or go part-time in order to do so. And then others are trying to juggle it all And of course, it's difficult to be as fully productive and concentrating on your work when you have these other responsibilities that are so important and can be emotionally and physically very draining. So one of the things maybe to consider is, do you know about the challenges that your own workforce is facing, and if there is a way to better accommodate? Sometimes it's just a matter of a conversation to understand what are the needs and challenges. Is there a way that you as an employer can accommodate and maybe save an employment relationship with somebody that might be thinking about whether or not they can handle both the work and the caregiver aspect of their lives? I know for a lot of us, I mean, Michigan is the type of place where family is important. So, somebody has to pick between family and their work. And in a lot of cases, they're going to, of course, pick family. So how can work accommodate that? And these conversations to understand where the needs are, and if it is possible to provide any level of flexibility, or even if you're reluctant to move toward remote opportunities, but maybe this could save an employment relationship. These are the sorts of things that employers, I think, increasingly are going to have to do. Labor force participation rate being below 60% in Michigan, about 59%, is at a historic low levels. And so even just, maintaining or preserving the participation that we have today and creating an environment where people can get back in if they want to or need to, is really going to require more and more accommodation going into the future. If you just look at the sheer challenge with respect to the size of the generation that it has retired or is in the process of retiring, and the generation behind it that really has a lot of responsibilities to take care of them, you can see how this is going to be something that will become more prevalent, not less prevalent, over time. And the survey work that we had covered in some of the recent SBAM articles with ASE highlight that. And maybe this would be a good opportunity too to plug SBAM's website. If you're a member of ours and you go to sbam.org, just check it in. There's a lot of great content. We work with great partners in a lot of different fields to make sure that we're getting the very best, so you can stay on top of what the trends are and be more proactive when it comes to managing your business. You're always working in your business. We want to help you work on your business. In this case, some of the resources or some of the insight and data provided in these in recent surveys and the articles, I think, can really help prioritize or just to do a little bit of investigation among the team and see what you might be able to do to help preserve the workforce that you currently have.
And I'll even add to that and let you know that if you're a thought leader in your field and you're interested in contributing content, if you say there's a hole, we need to fill this hole with different content on the site that you think other small business owners would find useful and valuable, please reach out to us at sbam@sbam.org, because we do accept submissions from members from time to time. So happy to work together on that. And speaking of member submissions, we actually had a member reach out to us last week with a question on mask rules for healthcare settings. So again, another reminder, if you do have questions or a topic you want us to cover, please, again, sbam@sbam.org is a great way to reach us. But Brian, did you get an answer on the healthcare mask rules?
Yeah, this was an area that, it used to be the content for this briefing was mostly from member questions that came in. We don't get as many member questions anymore on COVID rules because there aren't a lot of COVID rules left. Public transit there are, in healthcare there still are some rules as well. But you may have noticed that when you go to doctor's office or dentist's office or eye appointments and things, that some are no longer requiring masks, even though most healthcare settings do. The employees do wear masks. So what are the rules? What are the requirements? And as this question came in, I reached out to the State Department in charge of this area and had a conversation to make sure that I was understanding and asking correctly. And so I want to share the answer that I got with all of you. There actually are no customer or patient specific rules when it comes to most healthcare offices. I'm going to talk, there's an exception to this, but I'll cover that in a minute. But for most like doctors' offices, dentists, eye docs, for the vast majority of offices, there is no requirement that patients wear masks. You can set whatever policy you see fit if you have an office like that. There are some healthcare settings, like hospitals, that do respiratory treatments, have certain types of licenses. In those cases, there are requirements for patients to wear masks in those settings. If you are one of those, you probably already know it. So if there's something specific to your license, that my feedback from my conversation with the officials at the state is that there's the places where there are specific requirements for patients, then there's proactive communications in those settings. So if you go to a hospital, you're still going to be required to wear a mask as a visitor or a patient. But if you go to your local doctor's office, it's just going to be whatever policy that doctor's office puts in place. And then now, how about for the workers? Now, there was a federal rule for healthcare workers to wear masks. That rule technically expired, although they are in the process of trying to go from the temporary to the permanent standard. Permanent rules can still be let go of earlier. That's more of a technical term for how long the rule has been in place. At the moment, I think technically there's not a rule for the healthcare workers, but there is a process underway to essentially extend the previous requirements. So it doesn't really sound like there's a lot of enforcement happening out there, even for the healthcare workers. But nevertheless, on the customer side or on the patient side, there's it really is the discretion. Say for a few licenses, like where respiratory treatments are occurring on the premises, it is whatever policy the business itself, the practice itself, wants to establish.
All right, and while we're on the topic of COVID, let's take a look at the latest numbers for Data Monday.
All right, I'm gonna to share my screen. We'll look a little bit around the world, but of course we're gonna start here at home. We have the heat map for the country, and you can see that there's more red, especially here in the Northeast. That's what we saw before, but also the Midwest. You see it starting in the Midwest to heat up a little bit, and not surprising. Some epidemiologists kind of considered a mild wave to be inevitable here in this country. So as you look at what the let me go back there at the overall curve, it bottomed out to a level that was about as low as it had been in terms of the case counts, but now a moderate rise here. If we're going to look at some other countries, maybe predict what might happen here in the U.S., you see that overall hospitalization and ICUs way down. ICUs still staying flatter, but hospitalization you see ticking up. But I can't stress enough that this is a graph that doesn't mean what it used to be. It used to be that it was, we looked at it as, these are people that are hospitalized because they have COVID, but it is no longer a reliable stat for that they test everybody who is an inpatient to the hospital, gets tested for COVID, whether or not they're there for COVID. And so this is hospitalized with COVID, not because of COVID. And so I think this doesn't mean what it used to mean. So that ICU number, though, in terms of is ICU utilization high or not, I think is going to be probably the most reliable indicator about whether or not overall COVID is sending more people to the hospital. Looking again, these are the nationwide numbers that we're looking at. Deaths continue to fall. looking closer to home here at Michigan, you'll see the overall the heat map that there are, a few weeks ago, this looked very, it looked different. It was all the very lightest shade, and several places around the state, including our more populated areas, that are heating up a bit. Here's what the positivity looks like in terms of the overall case count. So you see it, it did bounce back up from its low point, although it really doesn't seem to be rising much lately. Although the state's only reporting numbers once a week now, so it makes it, where you hit it in the graph cycle. I don't know that this graph is going to probably look a little more like steps as opposed to a curve in the future. In Michigan, the hospitalization graph looks pretty much like the national one, where you see it, the overall hospitalized with positive cases going up, but ICU staying down and actually still reducing, and deaths still trending downward as well, but not as sharply as they were before. So take a look around the globe. You're looking at China now. So you see China's numbers were suspiciously low for a long time, and then jumped up quite a bit. You just have to keep in mind that 20,000, in this case, 30,000 cases a day was its peak, and it came down, coming down pretty sharply, just like the Omicron wave has all over the place. But China has 1.3 billion people, so I think that's a lot of people, and this isn't that many cases for that many people. But they have done a very, very strict lockdown, entered into the second month now, and one of the reasons why I think you saw the GDP last quarter contract a bit was because the disruptions in the durable good supply chains still really, really struggling because of the policy of establishing zero COVID in China. It's something they're still pursuing, and I don't think it's particularly realistic anymore if the rest of the world to adopt that type of a policy. But tough times in China right now. Even just food distribution with as severe lockdowns as they've had has proven to be challenging in some of their biggest cities. Deaths reported per day got up to 50. Again, that's a really small number for the population that they have in China. I wanted to take a look at Great Britain as we kind of close out Data Monday. Here's what their infection curve looks like. One caveat I want to add on to this, though, is that Great Britain has among the best public health services and public health surveillance system that you'll find anywhere in the globe. So, I think they know better than most countries exactly what's happening with disease spread. And so as you look at, they had their Omicron wave, which is that sharp spike up, and then the secondary, which was at BA2, it went up, but not by near as much. And so now it's starting to, to level off at a lower level. So, if I were, if I were a betting person, I'd say that our experience would look maybe similar to this, where you do see kind of a secondary or a smaller wave, but a smaller wave compared to the original Omicron, and one that that doesn't result in the same level of serious illness as before. As you can see with Great Britain, it had very, very strong vaccination rates, especially among those over 50. You can see their deaths never went up high like in the beginning of the pandemic, like they did in our state and our country. So, overall, I don't think this changes any of the prognosis. Definitely seeing upward trends in the Northeast. if previous patterns held, we would see that in the next year in the Midwest. And but I think overall, given the experience in other places, that it won't look or feel or have the type of impact that that previous waves have had. So, knock on wood, that that's the case here. But ultimately, I'd say that nothing unpredictable happening today with the Data Monday report.
All right, and we also wanted to point out a new resource that's available on michigan.gov. I'm going to share it if you want to kind of explain, Brian, what this
there's
showing everyone.
One thing to keep in mind is numbers, as numbers rise, that there's, I showed you a heat map that, is from one data source, but if you look at the CDC, they classify low, medium, and high by county. Their recommendations of whether or not to implement things like mask requirements in workplaces, they're tied to this this number, or to this color coded map. And so there's nowhere in Michigan where the CDC currently would recommend masks. The only reason why that should matter to you is if you're in the type of business that regularly gets visits from MIOSHA, the Workplace Safety Division in state government. They have adopted and will have been for a long time, but they're using the CDC's designation in terms of what they would require or what they would regulate using. And so if somebody were to file a complaint, or if you're going to get an inspection and you're in a county that is classified as high, which is none of them today, but I think we're going to probably have some that reach that level with this more moderate wave in front of us, hopefully more moderate wave in front of us, then it's possible that that MIOSHA might point back to this if they were already, I think more likely if they're already going to be there for another reason. So, manufacturing and healthcare and construction regularly, those are traditional industries that MIOSHA would regularly regulate. They technically regulate everybody, but the ones that they focused on in the past, it might make sense to just check on this map and see if you're in a county that that hits the that designation as high, because that's what MIOSHA will be looking at. I do not expect that there will be serious enforcement of that. I think they'll continue to be responsive. So in other words, somebody files a complaint, says this is an unsafe work environment, that's when they would more likely reach out and take a look, ask questions, whatever. So that is easier to find on the state. We wanted to share because the state puts it on the state site. It's easier to find there than at the CDC, I found. So we wanted to make you aware of that in case you want to just check in on it, say once a week or something, to make sure what the designation of your county, because these recommendations are by the county.
Yep, I dropped the link in the chat, and it's just michigan.gov/coronavirus. It's the page they've been updating with the numbers throughout the pandemic. Just real quick, check out our events that are upcoming in May. You can go to sbam.org/events, 2 owner-to-owner events next week. And then, of course, we have our annual meeting on June 16th, and we'd love to see you there. And you can find details on our website. Have a wonderful week. Go out and support small businesses, and we'll see you back here on Thursday.
Hey, thanks, everybody. See you on Thursday.